There are a lot of stories. Yeah, Mark. He's bringing paper with him.
Oh, watch out for the fires.
Get your timer going. Look at that.
I'm gonna,
That's all the emails he sent.
I'll just email this to everybody.
First, I want to acknowledge Paul Slovic. He acknowledged everybody else, but I guess it's not polite to acknowledge yourself. But this summer, I started to get worried about the local plans, and I said, I can't do the local plans. And so I started emailing Paul and the others. And Paul is the one who always quickly wrote back to me. He might have been in Sweden, he might have been in Vietnam, he might have been in Israel, I don't know. He was in a lot of places the last few months. And he was the one I could always rely on to find out what's going on. And Paul, I think, did the major job of the Eugene organizers. Does that count in my 4 minutes? Can I take an executive privilege? Thank you. Okay, let's see. I have the distinction, I believe, of being the only living dead person here tonight. And I'm talking about, at one time, I had the honor of having one of the runs the Noon Group does, named after me, the Christy Memorial. And I've had my ashes spread along the course. And I've also had the distinction of having outlived the memorial since it's not run anymore. So let me explain that. I had the misfortune of having to finally graduate in 1976 and leave Eugene. And the last day that I ran with the group, somebody had a new course. We ran the course afterwards, okay, what we're going to call it. And some wag said, well, Christy's leaving Eugene, the mecca of running. It'll be the same as Dad, so why don't we call it the Christy Memorial? So it was. And I visited about 10 years later, and I met this new fellow, and he looked shocked. He said, I thought you were dead. Nobody told him it was a joke. Well, I lived at the course is not run anymore. I particularly didn't like the course myself, but it's still an honor to have that. It's second only in my athletic career. It's second only to the honor I had in 1964 when the AAU took notice of me because I ran in an unsanctioned track meet at the age of 17. And they banned me for life in the Olympics. And I'm so proud that they took me into account. So that's the main reason I didn't make it to the Olympics, other than genetics and a lazy streak.
God, I wish I had that excuse. Who'd like the mic next? Now listen.
Yeah, there was 15 or 16.
This is not exactly a room full of type B, shy, retiring wallflowers. Galen,
Yep,
would you like to speak?
sure.
Given that you're a professional speaker.
That's right. I joined the Noon Group, this Noon Group, second time around in Eugene. I started running here in 1983 originally with another group. Believe me, there was another small group. But I found the Noon Group, I still remember my first run, it was the third hill, of course, keeps coming up. And I found myself running with John up the third hill. And I thought I was in pretty good shape. And I didn't know the course. And so I got up the first hill, thought this is pretty good. Staying with the leaders. Second hill, this is still pretty good. But then we turned the corner, and there was the third hill, and John started pulling away, and then I found out how much older he was than I was. And so that was my introduction. my whole experience with the Noon Group is that it's a very humbling experience. It keeps most of us humble, not only because such accomplished individuals professionally and as runners as well of incredible accomplishments, but also because of the sarcastic humor that is directed towards each other, particularly towards me. I've been laughed at for being late on occasion, for being bald. I can't help that. And what else? I've even been made fun of for having a pacemaker. This is how cruel this group is. So thank you for keeping me humble. But it's also an incredibly supportive group. And that's what I will always remember. Not only the events, but it's the day-to-day camaraderie and support and that small amount of pressure that if you think maybe you're not going to make it over today, you know that you're going to catch a little bit of something the next day when you show up. So that's quite an effort, quite an accomplishment to be both to humble you and be supportive at the same time through family death, through illnesses, all of those things. And so this has been a main support group for me. And I think that I don't see anyone else as often and spend as much time as I do with this group. We see a lot of each other, literally. I remember seeing Scott Monroe once in the grocery store with his wife Ann, and I blurted out without thinking. I said, "Scott, I barely recognize you with your clothes on." And I've said the same thing to Terry. But here's the thing, Terry doesn't use our locker room. I only see Terry on the trails. So thank you all for the support. It's been wonderful to spend the last 11, 12 years now with this support group.
Please.
Well, I'm one of the vast crowd of followers. And I used to follow Jim into the mountains and on trails, and I'd say, where are we going? And he says, well, it's all downhill from here on up. Down the old painted trail, just walking along and singing a song. Down the old dusty trail, me and my old hoss paint.
You actually followed him. You have a lot of time. Joe. Come on in.
My name is Alan Winkler. I ran between 1979 and 86 when I moved to Ohio. I have not been back to Eugene in 25 years now, and it's a real treat to come back. And the memories do come flooding back, and just a couple of quick recollections. I can remember the potluck meals we had together as people were preparing to run a marathon or what have you, with Ray doing magic tricks that my daughter Jenny still remembers, and it was wonderful. I remember occasionally running intervals on the track on a Tuesday, and Bill Bowerman would be there coaching Salazar or somebody else, and would kind of schmooze with us, and it was a treat. I just think about how I fell into the group. I had never really run regularly with people before, and took a 15-mile run soon after arriving in Eugene, and ended up talking to somebody in my department who said, there's a group of people, let me see if I can find Paul Slovic. And lo and behold, a couple of days later, he did introduce me, and I was running with the group ever since for the next 7 years that I was here. But one of my most important memories, I think, and I mentioned this earlier to Margaret, was running in the Portland Marathon in 1980. And this was going to be my sub-3-hour effort, and I was running 60 miles a week, occasionally 80. And the day was just a god-awful rainstorm. It was so wet that our feet were waterlogged after the first half mile. Paul remembers that because we went up together. And Margaret's husband, Tom, was riding a bicycle along with her. We ran together for the first 20 miles, keeping sub 7-minute pace, and we're feeling pretty good about it. The only problem was that Margaret was the first woman. I was running with her, and as we rounded turns periodically, somebody would yell out, "Go girl, you can beat that son of a bitch." The only problem is that I was the son of a bitch. It didn't feel so good. Margaret did win the women's race that way. I fell back in the last 4 or 5 miles and couldn't quite keep up with it, but it was a good time. So thank you all for the memories, and I'm glad we came back.
Thank you, Ramon.
I want to get on the plan.
John.
I don't know where to start. I'd like to start with thanking Ray for
John, talk to the mic.
talk to the mic. I'd like to start by thanking Ray. When I was a brand new professor here, and a couple years here, 1973 probably, I was at a meeting with Ray up in on Mount Hood, someplace. It was up on Mount Hood someplace.
It was retreat.
It was a retreat, yeah, with business leaders trying to. Those were the days when business was against the university, not like it is today, of course. And he and I went out for a run, and he said, "Why don't you join us?" So I did, and that was really great. So thanks a lot. And Jim and I have done a lot of. He got me up in winter camping, and it was just great, and just to carry the Mount Washington theme. Not very long ago, Jim and me and Bob Bumstead and I think Bob, you were along, and Bill and Kristen, Bill Kresko and Kristen Holslander went out, and we were going to ski from Big Lake over to D. Wright and down to Sisters in February. And we got up on Mount Washington, probably about as high as you guys were, and we were just as lost as we could be. And Bill was pulling a trailer and with his skis, and it kept dropping into those tree holes, and pretty soon me and Jim were up in front out of on the steep slope. Pretty soon here came Bill without the trailer, and he says, "It's just too hard. We got to go back." And he had been working just as hard as he could possibly have been working, because the trailer kept falling down in all the tree holes. And so then he and Bill and Kristen decided to leave, and then Bob, was it you or was it Bob Bumstead?
I think it must have been Bumstead.
So me and Bumstead and Jim then skied back down to Sisters on some back road. Do you remember that, Jim? And that was really quite fun. So that was after. I guess we spent just maybe 2 nights in the snow there that time. So then, but I also want to thank Paul and Steve Slovic especially, because they got me up into the mountains too in the summertime running, and it was just great. And we went up, and the first time we did a 25 miles on one side of the Sisters, and then we went down to Green Lakes Trailhead. We thumbed a ride. Somebody took us, these 3 sweaty guys, into Sisters. We stayed in a motel, and then somebody took us back up and dropped us off, and then we ran the other 25 miles on the other side back to the car, and that kind of got me into the mountains running, and that was really great, because I've just enjoyed that ever since. And I could tell, I don't know, lots of stories, but my time's probably up. Just let me tell one other thing about Jim. We went to 10th, he was in the 10th Mountain Division, and there's a 10th Mountain Division trail in Colorado, a hiking trail and a ski trail, and it's a hut-to-hut thing. We went back there skiing, Gary Christensen and me and Jim and some others. And Jim had an accident, a rafting accident, and it tore up his shoulder. And so he had his arm chained to his belt like this. And so here we are at 10,000 feet, 11,000 feet, and we're skiing in the mountains. And he has one ski pole and these World War II age skis and honestly World War II pants and backpack and one arm strapped here, and somehow he's able to stay out in front of all of us. It's really, really quite remarkable. Oh, I wanted to say one thing about Alan. So Alan,
He's my boss.
So Alan, main thing I remember about Alan is he keeps saying, you start going a little bit fast, and Alan would keep saying, I'm right on the edge. I'm right on the edge. Do you remember that? Just back it off just a little bit. I'm right on the edge.
So John, you really messed up. I mean, you just set a new precedent here. Christy wants the mic back.
Oh.
I messed up one part of my story. It'll take about 15 seconds. I said my ashes were spread along. How that happened, I got back after talked with the fellow thought I was dead. I was cleaning the ashes out of my wood stove, and I realized that they were my ashes, that they belonged to me. So I put some of these ashes in a vial and labeled it Mark Christy's ashes, and had one of the guys sprayed up along the Christy Memorial Trail. Thank you.
So I wanted to point out a couple of things about Postlethwait stories. Number one, did you notice how he used the word fun? We love the way John uses the word fun. That'll be fun. I think Galen was the one that said, some of my most harrowing physical experiences began when John said the word fun. Is there anyone else that would like the mic? Really? Come on. Larry? You want me to hold that crazy thing for you?
No, I'm going to film everybody while I talk here. Gee, I didn't realize how big of a crowd we had here, or I would have gotten stage fright and never said anything. I just had one quick story to tell about Mark Christy. He mentioned that he was not able to compete in the Olympics because he ran in a race that wasn't sanctioned. There's actually another reason that Mark could not run in the Olympics, and that's because he was a professional. One day, a group of us were running along Franklin Boulevard, and we were right where the great big rock wall is along Franklin there, and I looked up ahead and I went, oh my God, there's money. And Mark was to my right and just slightly in front of me. And he looked down and he grabbed that $20 bill off the ground and didn't miss a step. And about 5 feet more, there's another $10 bill. He reached down and he got that. And then there was a $5 bill, and I tried to push him out of the way, but he jumped forward and he grabbed that. I think he came out about $35 ahead on that run. Do you remember that?
I remember that, and Larry, that was the only time I ever outsprinted you.
And I don't know, I had an old pair of kids' running shoes, so he outsprinted me because he had much better quality Nikes. Oh, one. Well, to me it looked like 100. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Now I've got to get back to my camera. Surely there's somebody else out there. Oh, Paul.
Thanks. Just a second chance here. One of the things that's great, I mean, everyone in the group and family, we're all individuals. We all have, interesting stories and personalities. And most of the time, people around us, we don't get to know them that well. But when you run with people, as we do over, day after day after day, year after year, decade after decade, you do get to know people and appreciate their special qualities, their personalities. And in recent years, we don't quite stay together the same way we used to. When we first started, we're all pretty much the same age and ability. We would run as a cluster. And now we range from 20s to the 70s, and we string out pretty quickly. But so I can't get to know everyone the way I used to. But one person who occasionally, when he's taking it easy, I can keep up with is Richard Leutzinger over here. And he's just one of many. When you get to know an individual, you see what a remarkable person they are. So Richard, raise your hand so people can see her. Richard, he has done so many things. He's traveled the world. He was a journalist. He was our media contact here for this because he's been a journalist. He's been a nurse. He was I learned that he was in Sudan in the 80s, in a refugee camp. He wrote a book about this, and described the conditions working, 110, 120 degree weather in tents with incredibly ill people who were contagious, things like that. And he also volunteers. He goes down to, when there's a hurricane in the southeast, he volunteers. He's been a nurse. He goes down and helps people, volunteers, for the Red Cross and other places. But one of the things, he writes haiku. So if you look in this book, you'll see. I said, well, Richard, why don't you do a haiku for the book? Well, he did 7, maybe 8 for the book. They're scattered throughout the book, and he wrote a book of haiku on baseball. The whole book is baseball haiku, and it's really amazing. And the last thing I want to say, when I learned about Richard, was that he played on the University of Oregon football team for Len Casanova. I mean, Richard, how much do you weigh? About 117. and he has, he wasn't much heavier then. So how did he do this? Well, and he played center. He was a center on the University of Oregon football team at 17 pounds. So that's, pretty amazing. He actually got into a game.
The truth a little bit.
And you got into a game, right? Yeah. So he was a journalist, a major. He wanted to do a story on the football team. So he approached Len Casanova and said that, but Casanova said, well, Richard said, well, can I join the team and kind of hang out and get to know what goes on with his team? And Casanova said, well, yeah, but you have to have some skill. So he said, well, maybe if you could kick, you could be on the team. Am I accurate? So he said, he told Richard, practice kicking, and if you can, learn to kick extra points or things like that, we'll let you on the team. So Richard did that and succeeded and made the team. Did you actually make an extra point in the?
Yes, they let me into a 51-0 game.
But he's the only one of us who played the varsity football. But I mean, everyone has equally important and interesting stories, and it's just so great when you get to know people like this and appreciate them for who they are. Thanks.
I just want to add to that story. The reason why we know that story is because Richard was injured, and Charlie Ward and Jay Bonzer meet some other guys, and they go walking on Wednesday instead of running. And so Richard was injured, and he decided to join the walking group. And one of the other walkers was a University of Oregon football player, and he said to Richard, he said, "You kind of look familiar," and he said, "Do you have a pair of lips tattooed on your butt?" Richard said, "Yes." And so they hadn't seen each other for 50 years, I think. 50 years, and this guy remembered Richard's butt for 50 years.
I happen to have seen Richard's tattoo. I was going to have the good grace to just let that one go, John. Thanks for sharing. Les, would you like the mic?
Oh, yeah. I just want to say another thing about being humbled by the group, and also it's about a member who hasn't been recognized, who has passed away, and that is my dog, Nikki, who the most wonderful, even-tempered dog you'll ever meet. And he used to run with me for, I don't know how many years, 10 years, until he couldn't run anymore. And but what I want to say was I would show up with Nikki, join the group. Often I was late, so they already had started running, and I'd come running up with Nikki, and everybody would say, "Hi, Nikki." They would never mention my name. Just greeted Nikki.
Anyone else? John Carter. Nice to see you up here.
I think I'm the first person to get up here and take the mic who's been with the group for less than 10 years. So I'm a relative newbie, but I just wanted to tell you how I managed to get associated with this wacky group. It all has to do with beer. My wife and I, Chris and I, rode over to the Malheur fuel station with Tom Titus and his wife Kim in his dad's Ford F-350 crew cab pickup. There was plenty of room for us. And so we had 14 hours to share, and in 14 hours you can learn a lot about each other. One of the things we found out was that we both had made beer in the past, and I was making beer at that point and had some in our lower level. So after that adventure was over, shortly thereafter, we asked him over to have some of that beer. And as we sat around and drank that beer, he said, one of the other things that we found out a bit about each other on that 14-hour jaunt was that we both ran. He said, "Well, why don't you come out on a Saturday morning and see what it's like?" So I did that. I showed up. I remember the first person I met was Dr. Fun. I found out that everybody else called him that, and that's a very apt name, I have to say, John. And so, yeah, it all my history with the group all traces back to beer.
In case you're wondering, John makes excellent beer. It's really good. And he makes really good wine. Yeah. John's a chemist. And you should also know that in that conversation about running, John said, I've run a couple of marathons. Yeah? How fast? Well, 2:38. Do I have that right? 2:37. I cheated by a minute. And he was in the back seat, thank God. He couldn't see the look on my face. I mean, my pupils probably dilated by double, and I went, oh. So you're like a real runner. We are all in awe of John and what he does out there. Anyone else? You all sitting back being polite? Travis, are you coming up here to take the mic, or are you going over to get another beer? Or are you going to use the bathroom?
That way? No, I thought I should come up here and hopefully represent the new age of this running group, because it's pretty amazing to see everybody out here, and hopefully we can recruit some more people to keep it going another 50 years. And Mark's already gave me all his notes for the 100th anniversary, so I think we'll be ready for that. I just wanted to share my first experience with the running group. I've only been with it for 6 years. It was 2005. I just moved to Eugene. My wife was going to grad school here, and I had just been hired by the university. My first real job after college. So my supervisor, Jim Bouse, who couldn't be here tonight, but he would have enjoyed this, says you should come out at lunchtime and go for a run. And I said, all right, well that sounds good. I ran in high school and I was okay. So I hadn't run in a few years since then, so I found out in what good shape I really wasn't then. But so we were gonna go run to the top of Skinner Butte, and it was August, it was hot out. So we just crossed over the wood footbridge right next to Autzen, and my supervisor turns his ankle and it hits the ground pretty hard. And he used more colorful metaphors than I've ever heard in my life then. And I think I turned bright red. This is my first boss in a real job, and he's on the ground cursing. And, you know, I had no idea what to do. And luckily, Richard was out on the run with us. So Richard shepherded me to the top of the Skinner Butte, and I was pretty tired by then. And then so we had to get back the other 3 miles to campus. And I remember running along E-Web there and just sweating and dying and wondering when it was going to be over. And looking over at Richard, and he's just as happy as can be and a smile on his face. And I knew right then I was in the right group to be enjoying running with, because these guys are going to show me how to enjoy life and to run as long as possible. So I'm very happy to be part of it. We're going to keep it going, and hopefully I won't be the only person of this age group in here. So thank you, and yeah.
Travis, you said you ran in high school and you were okay. Tell these people what your 800 meters time was in high school, which was okay.
Okay. I'll tell it in reference to the women's 800 meter world record. It's only 0.5 seconds faster than the women's 800 meter world record.
Which is what, 153?
153, 8. That means nothing though when you're on a 20-mile run with these guys.